Good evening. In our news bulletin for tonight, the new departure tax has now increased to $80 effective as of the 1st of July. Disaster preparedness community outreach programs rolled out specifically for those on the western coastal areas. Kanu Wi-Fi users were unable to access internet services due to satellite disruptions. The newer crash fire unit responded to bushfires and also reminded people to refrain from burning fires due to the dry and windy conditions. Clearing developments at Funukula marked the beginning of plans to build a new supermarket complex. Government has started to implement an increase in the departure tax that will now see people aged 12 and above paying $80. Public notice was issued yesterday informing people of these changes, and it has been met with some confusion, especially for visitors who were surprised with the sudden increase. Parliament passed the amendment to the Departure Tax Regulations 2016 in February of this year, based on figures that had already been approved by Cabinet. There was an agreement that the departure tax would be built into the airline ticket costs and would make it easier. But the main question was regarding the amount of money from $34 to $80 as a major hike without justification. The question still remains what the breakdown is for this more than 100% increase and whether funds generated from this tax would go directly towards airport improvements or into the government's general coffers. We were unable to get a comment from Treasury Department or the Minister when this news bulletin went to air, but we will bring you more on this news story in our future news bulletins. Disaster preparedness is at the forefront of a number of community outreach programs initiated by the Niue Disaster Management Office in partnership with village councils. The first session was held with the village of Alofi South, who received a positive response, especially with the distribution of some dynamo-powered torch radios and ongoing awareness during sessions.
From the session this is pretty much like the first one we're giving out to the communities, and that is done with the Alofi South community. But from the last 2 years that we've been having meetings with village councils just before the cyclone season. So it's pretty much in about October of every year. In the last 2 years, we have spoke with them and given them ideas on how to prepare for disasters. So the first piece of equipment material that we came up with is the magnets that we have printed out for each household about the tsunami and also for the cyclone warning. So people will be able to have these available and they'll be able to see it. And then from there, we also encourage people to have their disaster kits or their go bags, so that if anything happens, they'll be able to use their backpacks with all their gears in it, their food, their clothing, their spare stuff that will last them for like 48 to 72 hours before we get assistance from outside if it's a bad situation like Cyclone Hector. So since then, we were encouraging to hold workshops from the coastal villages on the west side of our island, from Avaseli up to the Wake area, and then we've had it with Alofi South, and we are able to distribute to each household on the coastal area some of the flashlights that goes with the radio, and it works by dynamo, and other little stuff that they need to go in their backpack. So we're just encouraging people to prepare this.
The villages on the western coastal areas have been specifically targeted because they are at high risk when cyclones or tsunamis strike. As part of the disaster risk reduction and preparedness, households have been encouraged to set aside emergency kits and the necessary resources to be prepared at all times.
The only other information that we're also putting it out now per villages, so people to put in their names if they needed their trees cut. So this is the time that from April to about October for them to let us know, so then we can come around and cut down their trees. and not during the season, because they normally wait until about November till April when they see the wind and the rain, and then they'll ask us to have their trees cut down. So if they needed to have their trees cut down, they'll contact us, and then we will come and assess what they need to do or what we can help with, and then we will help them out.
The Disaster Management Office is looking at ways to continue working with the village councils and other villages on the coast side to conduct similar sessions. Kanu Wi-Fi customers have been without internet services since Friday last week, and the internet service provider is working on the unexpected disruption to satellite services. More than 100 customers have been affected as the international satellite links or services have been down due to a few changes in the providers. Parts for the satellite are expected to arrive on today's flight. Meanwhile, it has been an anxious wait for customers who primarily use Kanu to conduct business and day-to-day operations. Kanu Wi-Fi customers have been assured that the ISP is working to rectify the problem to restore services by this afternoon. The Crash Fire Department continues to warn the public not to be complacent when lighting fires, especially now that the dry and windy conditions make fire risks a hazard. Over the weekend, there was a fire along the road to the village of Hakupu, and that burnt down a little shed, and the Crash Fire Department responded to put the fire out. Last week, there was also a fire that spread at the area in Tufukia, near the previous hospital area. The fire department responded because it was also close to a residential area. There has not been a fire ban activated, but Crash Fire Department and the Niue Police continues to warn the public to be mindful and cautious when starting fires, especially around residential areas. The Swanson supermarket complex has commenced with the clearing of the new supermarket site located at Funuakula. The delay in building the new supermarket has been due to the arrival of the building materials that are now set to arrive on the August boat. According to a press release from Swanson's, the new supermarket will be more spacious and will provide parking for over 70 customers. The warehouse will also be located within the supermarket as a means of convenience for employees. According to Swanson's manager, Amanda Pitta, that Swanson is working with some of the government departments so that the building project will move along smoothly and according to the time frame proposed. Even though there have been delays of receiving building materials for the new supermarket, the construction is projected to be completed by the end of this year and operational by the end of February next year.